Welcome to Nocturnal Tales. Tonight we cross the Atlantic to Pinehurst, North Carolina, where the air smells of pine and sand and horses. White houses stand among the trees like arrangements rather than accidents, and rich men pursue small white balls with expressions of sacred misery. The Sandhills bride begins with a letter from a Boston attorney, written in a hand of old-fashioned elegance, concerning a young woman named Eleanor Drayton, 32, handsome, very rich, and married less than 6 months to a man who brought to the Union Charm a good seat on a horse and very little else. 4 mornings ago she was found dead on a sandy track beyond the pines, blood upon her coat, bruising at the throat, and a letter left unposted in her desk that ends, "If I am wrong, forgive me. If I am right, remember that I did not go blindly." As always, this tale is inspired by the spirit of the great Golden Age crime writers. But the plot, characters, and text you're about to hear are entirely our own creation, though the historical epilogue at the end draws on a real and still debated American mystery. This episode is brought to you by the listeners who support Nocturnal Tales on Patreon, and by those who help with one-off tips on Buy Me a Coffee or PayPal. If you'd like to support our work, you'll find all the links in the description. And a quick note, our ebook, Nocturnal Tales, The Collected Mysteries, Volume 2, is available now for $3.99. 8 earlier mysteries, rewritten and expanded for the page, with original Art Deco illustrations throughout. You can find it on Patreon, Gumroad, and Buy Me a Coffee. Links in the description. Now settle in as the motorcar turns beneath the Carolina pines. A widower passes on a chestnut horse without looking toward the house, and a mother, who has had enough comfort to choke a horse, asks our detective for the only thing she has not yet received: the truth. Chapter 1. The Bride Who Walked at Dawn. It was not, I confess, my idea to go to North Carolina. Poirot had received the letter at breakfast and had read it with that stillness of his which, to the uninitiated, suggested mere politeness, but which I had long since learned to regard with dread. Whenever Poirot became very still, some unfortunate person was either dead already or about to be proved a liar. The envelope was thick, cream-coloured, and addressed in a hand of old-fashioned elegance. Monsieur Hercule Poirot, Whitehaven Mansions, London. "A woman," I observed. Poirot looked at me over the top of the letter. "Your deductions, Hastings, they leap like the young gazelle." "Well, the handwriting is that of a solicitor, my friend." I coughed. Poirot smiled, but his eyes had returned to the page. "It concerns America. North Carolina, a place called Pinehurst." "Golf," I said at once. "Ah, you know it." "Only by reputation. Rich men, pine trees, excellent fairways, and ladies who dress for luncheon as if luncheon were a diplomatic crisis." "Then it will suit you admirably." The letter, as Poirot presently explained, came from a Mr. Jeremiah Alder of Boston, attorney to the family of a young widow, or rather, a young bride, whose death had already caused a considerable scandal across several states. Her name was Mrs. Eleanor Drayton. She was 32, handsome, very rich, and had been married less than 6 months to a man who, according to the family, had brought to the Union Charm a good seat on a horse, and very little else. 4 mornings earlier she had been found dead on a sandy track beyond the pines, not far from the outskirts of Pinehurst village. There was blood upon her coat, bruising at the throat, and signs that she had not come there alone. The coroner's verdict, so far as one could gather through the guarded language of the letter, had wavered like a drunkard between accident, suicide, and murder, before settling upon nothing at all. "And the husband?" I asked. Poirot folded the letter precisely. "The husband is distraught." "That sounds proper." "Yes. It is often the first refuge of the improper. 2 weeks later we stepped from the train into air unlike any I had known in England. It was soft, dry, resinous, and faintly golden, filled with the scent of pine and sand and horses. The station at Southern Pines possessed that curious American mixture of new paint and old confidence. Beyond it waited a long motor car, a Negro chauffeur in a smart cap, and beside him a grave, spare gentleman with a silver moustache and a face like a locked deed box. "Mr. Alder?" said Poirot. The gentleman bowed. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings, I am grateful you came." His accent had the clipped refinement of New England, and the look he gave Poirot was not quite hopeful. It was the look of a man who had exhausted doctors, sheriffs, and relations, and had now sent overseas for a miracle, though he did not believe in miracles. As we drove through Southern Pines and on towards Pinehurst, the country opened itself to us in long sweeps of pale sand, wire grass, and endless ranks of pine. There were white houses set back among trees, broad verandas, neat lawns, stables, clubhouses, and everywhere the discreet evidence of money attempting not to look vulgar. Presently the driver turned beneath an arch of trees, and Pinehurst appeared, not so much a town as an arrangement. It had been planned, polished, and restrained. The hotel stood broad and pale amid clipped lawns. Motor cars glided where carriages must once have passed, and on the green distances beyond, men in tweed and caps pursued small white balls with expressions of sacred misery. "Behold," murmured Poirot, "the English country house but spread out beneath the American sun." "And with better plumbing, I expect," I said. Mr. Alder did not smile. We were taken first not to the hotel but to a house on the edge of the village, low-roofed and gracious, with green shutters and a veranda that looked towards a stand of long-leaf pines. There we were received by Mrs. Augusta Staveley, mother of the dead woman. She was a tall, spare lady in black, with the sort of face on which grief had made no collapse, only a sharpening. One saw at once that she belonged to that class of American woman who could have crossed the Rockies in a bonnet and still corrected the manners of the mule. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, "you have come too late to save my daughter. Perhaps you can save her name." Poirot bowed. "Madame, I shall do what is possible. I do not ask for comfort. I have had enough comfort to choke a horse. Ministers, cousins, clubwomen, reporters, comfort everywhere. What I want is the truth." "That," said Poirot, "is less common." She gave a short nod, as if this pleased her. Mr. Alder led us into a cool drawing-room, where the blinds had been half lowered. A portrait of Eleanor Drayton stood upon a table beside a bowl of white camellias. I looked at it with interest. She had been a striking woman rather than a pretty one, dark-haired, strong-eyed, with a frank, almost challenging expression. There was breeding there, and intelligence, and something else. An inward loneliness, perhaps, which the painter had caught without meaning to. "My daughter had money," said Mrs. Staveley abruptly. "Too much money. Her grandfather made it. Her father preserved it. Men have been trying to marry it ever since." "And Mr. Drayton?" asked Poirot. "Married it." Mr. Alder made a small movement. "Augusta." "No, Jeremiah. Monsieur Poirot has not crossed the Atlantic to be fed sugared lies. Roger Drayton was handsome, attentive, impecunious, and evasive. He claimed Virginia family, Kentucky horses, and business prospects in New York. The family could confirm the first in part, the second not at all, and the third only from his own mouth." "Did your daughter know this?" asked Poirot. "She knew enough to be warned." "But she married him." Mrs. Staveley looked at the portrait. Eleanor was 32. That is not old, Monsieur Poirot, except in drawing-rooms. She had been admired, courted, flattered, and appraised. I think she wanted just once to be chosen without calculation. There was a silence. Poirot's voice, when he spoke, was gentle. "And after the marriage?" 6 months of theatre, flowers, parties, riding mornings, golf afternoons, smiles in public, quarrels behind doors. You heard them? I heard one. Others heard more. Mr. Alder opened a leather case and withdrew several folded papers. These are copies of statements taken informally. The sheriff has been cooperative to a point. To a point? I asked. The point at which local pride begins, said Mrs. Staveley dryly. Poirot took the papers but did not look at them. Tell me of the morning she died. Mrs. Staveley sat very straight. Eleanor left the house before 7. She often walked early. She said the air was cleaner before the golfers and motor cars spoiled it. She wore a grey coat, a small felt hat, and carried no bag. At 9, a stable boy found her body along a sand road beyond the old bridle path. Robbery? Asked Poirot. Her wedding ring remained. A diamond brooch remained. $30 remained in her coat pocket. And the husband? Claims he slept until 8:30. Claims. He was seen at the stables before 7. Mr. Alder said quietly, by a groom named Caleb Pine. The boy is frightened now and has altered his story twice. Poirot's eyes opened a little wider. Ah! Mrs. Staveley leaned forward. There is more. Eleanor wrote to me the night before she died. The letter was not posted. It was found in her desk. She held out a single sheet. Poirot took it. I saw only the last lines written in a firm but hurried hand. I begin to think I have been very foolish. If I am wrong, forgive me. If I am right, remember that I did not go blindly. Poirot read the words twice. At that moment, from somewhere outside, came the sound of hoofbeats on sand, quick, controlled, elegant. I turned towards the window. A man on a chestnut horse passed along the drive. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and sat the animal beautifully. His face, glimpsed beneath a riding hat, was pale and handsome in the rather too perfect manner of a cinema actor. He did not look towards the house. Mrs. Staveley's mouth hardened. Roger Drayton, she said. The widower rode on beneath the pines, straight-backed and graceful, and vanished into the bright Carolina morning. Poirot watched him go. Then he looked again at the dead woman's portrait. Madame, he said softly, before one asks who killed Mrs. Drayton, one must ask a question far more delicate. What question? Poirot placed the letter on the table. Whom did she fear, and whom did she still love? Chapter 2. The Man Who Rode Too Well. There are certain men whom one distrusts at once, not because they have done anything improper, but because they appear incapable of doing anything clumsily. Roger Drayton was such a man. I do not mean that he was effeminate or affected. Quite the reverse. He had the bronzed, easy look of a man accustomed to horses, clubs, and admiration. He moved with that peculiar American assurance which seems to say, "Here I am. No apology is necessary." His clothes fitted him beautifully, his voice was pleasant, and his grief, when he presented himself to us half an hour later, was arranged with perfect taste. "My mother-in-law has brought you here," he said, after Mrs. Staveley had introduced us with the stiffness of a magistrate reading a sentence. "I can hardly object. If anyone can clear this damned fog, I shall be grateful." "Fog?" said Poirot. Drayton looked towards the lowered blinds. Rumour? Whispering? People looking away in the clubhouse? Men who shook my hand last week now studying their scorecards as if salvation lay hidden in the pencil marks. You find that painful? My wife is dead, Monsieur Poirot. It was well said. Too well, perhaps. Poirot inclined his head. You rode this morning? Drayton's expression did not change, but the air around him seemed to tighten. I ride most mornings. Even now? Especially now. A horse does not ask questions. I have known horses. said Poirot, who asked very many, but perhaps in French. A faint smile touched Drayton's lips and vanished. You have spoken with Augusta, I gather. With Madame Staveley, yes. Then you have heard I am a fortune hunter, a liar, and possibly a murderer. Mrs. Staveley rose. You may leave my house, Roger, before you perform yourself into respectability. He turned to her, and for the first time I saw something raw break through the polish. I loved Eleanor. You loved what came with her. His face hardened. You never understood her. None of you did. You guarded her as if she were a bank vault, then wondered why she mistook the first open door for love. The words struck home. I saw it in Mrs. Staveley's face, though she did not flinch. Poirot watched them both with that bright stillness I knew so well. Mr. Drayton, he said, I shall need to ask you certain questions. Perhaps Captain Hastings and I may walk with you? Drayton gave a short laugh. Walk? In Pinehurst, Monsieur Poirot, one either rides, drives, or plays golf badly. Then we shall offend local custom. We set out along the veranda steps and onto a sandy path between the pines. The sun had risen higher, but the air remained mild. Resin scented the breeze. Far off came the crack of a golf club striking a ball, followed by the polite exclamation of a man pretending he had meant to do exactly that. Poirot trotted beside Drayton with some difficulty, for the sand did not suit his patent shoes. On the morning your wife died, said Poirot, you were asleep until 8:30. Yes. A servant woke you? No. I woke naturally. And before that you did not leave the house? No. Yet you were seen at the stables before 7. Drayton stopped. The groom again, he said. Caleb Pine. A boy with more imagination than sense. He has changed his story. Because people bullied him into giving one. Did you speak to him? I told him not to repeat nonsense. Ah, said Poirot, that is often the best way to make nonsense important. Drayton looked at him sharply, then resumed walking. I was not at the stables. Can anyone confirm that? My valet brought hot water at 8. That does not confirm 7. No. And your wife? Did she tell you she was going out? No. You quarrelled the night before? Drayton's jaw moved. Married people quarrel. About what? Money, naturally. That is what everyone expects, is it not? Let us not disappoint them. Was it about money? He kicked at the sand with his boot. Partly. And the other part? A rider appeared between the trees ahead of us, a young woman in a dark habit mounted on a grey mare. She drew rein as she saw Drayton. She was fair, composed, and handsome in a cool, sporting fashion, with clear blue eyes and a mouth that looked capable of keeping secrets. Roger, she said. Miss Ashby. The name came out too quickly, with too much neutrality. Drayton turned to us. Miss Caroline Ashby, Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings. She inclined her head. You are the detective from London. From Belgium, mademoiselle, said Poirot, though the train was indeed from London. I hope you find what Mrs. Staveley once found. That is an interesting way to phrase it. Her mare shifted beneath her. She controlled it with the smallest pressure of her hand. Mrs. Staveley has always been very determined. And you, Mademoiselle Ashby? I try not to be. Drayton said, Caroline, this is hardly my concern. Her eyes moved to him. Eleanor was my friend. Were you with her the evening before she died? Asked Poirot. I was at the club. With Mrs. Drayton? For a time. Was she distressed? Miss Ashby looked past us towards the pines. Eleanor could be distressed in a room full of people and still make every man there think she was laughing at his jokes. That is not an answer, Drayton made an impatient movement. "Caroline, ride on." For a moment I thought she would refuse. Then she touched her crop lightly to the mare's shoulder. "To the old bridle path, Monsieur Poirot," she said. "If you are really investigating, you should ask why Eleanor walked there at all." And with that she rode away, leaving the sand briefly disturbed, and Drayton looking after her with a face he forgot to arrange. Poirot observed this omission with interest. "The old bridle path," he murmured. "We shall go there." Drayton looked annoyed. "Now, unless it inconveniences the murderer." The remark was so mild that for a second I nearly missed it. Drayton did not. Colour rose under his tan. "You have a theatrical manner, Monsieur Poirot." "No, merely a Belgian one." We continued in silence. The path narrowed as it passed beyond the manicured limits of Pinehurst. The ground became rougher, the pines taller, the sand broken by clumps of wire grass and low scrub. It was a lonely place, and yet not wild. One felt civilization only a few hundred yards away. The hotel, the club, the stables, the idle rich taking exercise under medical protest. At last, Drayton halted. "There," he said. A strip of disturbed ground lay beside the path, partly covered now by wind-blown sand. I saw a pine stump, a scatter of dead needles, and beyond them the faint marks of many feet. "This is where she was found?" "Yes." Poirot removed his hat. For a little while he said nothing. He walked in small, careful circles, bending now and then, his moustaches twitching in concentration. He examined the path, the stump, the scrub, and a shallow depression where water must once have stood after rain. "The body lay how?" Drayton pointed. "Head there, feet towards the path." "On her back?" "Slightly turned." "You saw her?" "Yes." "At what time?" "After they brought me." "And you touched nothing?" Drayton stared at him. "My wife was lying dead in the sand. I knelt beside her." "Ah?" "I held her hand." "Which hand?" "The left." Poirot turned sharply. "You are certain?" "Yes." "And the wedding ring was on that hand?" "Of course." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Of course," he repeated. A motor car sounded somewhere behind us. Presently a heavy-set man in a light suit came down the path, perspiring and displeased. "Mr. Drayton," he called. "I was told you'd brought the foreign gentleman out here." Drayton's expression closed. "Sheriff Braddock." The sheriff removed his hat, nodded at me, and gave Poirot a look in which suspicion struggled with reluctant courtesy. "Monsieur Poirot, I don't know how you do things over in Europe, but here we have procedures." Poirot beamed at him. "How fortunate. I adore procedures when they are not fatal to intelligence." Sheriff Braddock did not appear to know whether he had been insulted. "The inquest is adjourned," he said. "The coroner has not ruled murder." "Bodies," said Poirot, "are sometimes more decisive than coroners." The sheriff's eyes hardened. Mrs. Drayton had troubles. Family pressure, marital disappointment, nerves. People fall, people wander, people do foolish things. "And people," said Poirot, "are killed." A gust of wind passed through the pines, making them whisper above us. It was then that I noticed something caught low in the scrub near the stump. A pale thread, almost hidden against the sand. Poirot had seen it too. He bent, picked it up with infinite care, and laid it across his palm. It was not thread. It was a narrow strand of silk, torn and stained dark at one end. Drayton stared at it. The sheriff swore softly. Poirot looked from one man to the other. "Messieurs," he said, "the dead lady did not come here alone, and someone has been most anxious that we should believe she did." Chapter 3. The silk in the sand. The strand of silk, small as it was, had the immediate effect of making 3 men profoundly uncomfortable. Sheriff Braddock looked as if he would have preferred it to be a rattlesnake. Roger Drayton looked at it with the controlled distaste of a man seeing an unpaid bill. Poirot, on the other hand, regarded it with tenderness. He took from his pocket one of those little envelopes in which he was forever placing cigarette ash, crumbs, hairs, and other articles which, to my mind, ought to have remained where Providence had put them. "Do not touch, if you please," he said. "I wasn't proposing to," said the sheriff, "but you'll hand that over." "Naturally, when I have looked at it." "You've looked." "I have observed. It is not the same thing." Sheriff Braddock's face deepened in colour. "Monsieur Poirot, I respect Mrs. Staveley's grief, and I respect Mr. Alder's position as family attorney, but I won't have outsiders turning this into a circus." "A circus?" Poirot looked about him at the silent pines, the pale sand, and the empty bridle path. "It lacks the elephants." Drayton made an impatient sound. "Sheriff, let him have his theatricals. If a piece of silk proves I murdered my wife, I shall be interested to hear how." "Ah," said Poirot softly, "but I did not say it proved that." The remark silenced him. I confess that I myself could see little in the discovery beyond the obvious fact that a woman's garment, or perhaps a scarf, had caught upon the scrub. The silk was pale, a cream or champagne colour, though the dark stain at the torn end made certainty difficult. Poirot held it up against the light and examined the weave. "Expensive," he murmured. "In Pinehurst," said the sheriff. "That narrows it down to every woman with a suitcase." "Not every woman tears her silk beside a dead body." The sheriff did not answer. We returned to the Staveley house shortly before luncheon. Mrs. Staveley received the news of the silk with a grim satisfaction which I found almost unnerving. "You see," she said, "she was murdered." "Madame," said Poirot, "the silk proves only that something has been concealed or overlooked." "Overlooked by whom?" Sheriff Braddock, who had followed us in his motor car, stiffened. "Mrs. Staveley, my men searched that place." "Then your men require spectacles." "Augusta," said Mr. Alder quietly. He had arrived during our absence and stood near the fireplace, thin and correct, his silver hair catching the light. He had the rare gift, often found in lawyers and undertakers, of lowering the temperature in a room merely by entering it. Mrs. Staveley turned away. "Forgive me, Sheriff. My daughter is dead. I am not at my best." Braddock accepted this apology with the air of a man accepting a poor substitute for cash. Poirot said, "I should like to speak with the servants." Mrs. Staveley rang the bell. The household staff were fewer than one might have expected for so elegant a residence. But this, Mr. Alder explained, was not the Staveleys' principal home. They had taken the house for the season. There was a cook named Mrs. Pruitt, a maid called Della, a chauffeur, and a coloured gardener who had already been questioned twice and had, by all accounts, known nothing whatever. Della came first. She was a thin, nervous girl of perhaps 20, with reddened hands and eyes that would not rest long on any face. She had brought hot water to Mrs. Drayton on the evening before the death, and had heard voices from the bedroom. "Whose voices?" asked Poirot. "Mrs. Drayton and Mr. Drayton, sir." "Angry?" The girl twisted her apron. "Not loud angry, cold angry." "A useful distinction," said Poirot. "What was said?" "I didn't listen, sir." Poirot sighed. "No one ever listens, Hastings. It is astonishing that servants know anything." The girl flushed. "I heard Mrs. Drayton say, 'You will not make a fool of me before them all.' And Mr. Drayton said something about her mother. Then she said, 'It is not my mother I am afraid of now. Mrs. Staveley closed her eyes briefly. "And later?" asked Poirot. Later, Miss Ashby came. Drayton, who had been standing by the window, turned sharply. "Caroline came to the house?" "Yes, sir, about 10. "You did not tell me that." "You didn't ask me, sir." There was no insolence in the answer. If anything, there was terror. "What did Miss Ashby want?" asked Poirot. "To see Mrs. Drayton." "And did she?" "Yes, sir, in the little sitting room." "For how long?" "Maybe 20 minutes, maybe more." "Did they quarrel?" Della hesitated. Mrs. Staveley said, "Answer." "I heard Miss Ashby crying." This, I noticed, disturbed Drayton more than anything that had yet been said. Poirot's gaze moved to him, then back to the maid. "And Mrs. Drayton?" She said, "I cannot help you, Caroline. Not now." "Help her with what?" "I don't know, sir." Mrs. Pruitt, the cook, added little beyond the opinion that young people in Pinehurst stayed up too late, ate too little breakfast, and kept too many secrets. The chauffeur, a solemn man named Willis, proved more useful. He had driven Mrs. Drayton to the club the previous afternoon, brought her back before dinner, and later taken Mr. Drayton out alone at 9:30. "Where?" asked Poirot. "To the Carolina Hotel, sir." Drayton looked annoyed. "I went for a drink." "And returned when?" 10:15. Willis coughed. Poirot turned to him. "You disagree?" "No, sir." Mr. Drayton returned to the hotel entrance at 10:15. "Ah," said Poirot, "but not home?" "No, sir. He told me I could go, said he'd walk back." "And did he?" "I wouldn't know, sir." Drayton said sharply, "This is absurd. Pinehurst is not London. Men walk." "Indeed," said Poirot. "Women also." At luncheon, the atmosphere was so charged that even I, who have a healthy appetite in almost all circumstances, found the chicken somewhat difficult. Poirot ate delicately and appeared absorbed in the pattern of the china. Afterwards, we went to the club. There are places built not merely to house people, but to classify them. The Pinehurst clubhouse was one of these. It smelt of leather chairs, cigar smoke, polished wood, damp wool, and money inherited with varying degrees of legitimacy. Men spoke in low voices over scorecards. Women in pale dresses moved between verandas with the serene cruelty of those who know exactly who has been invited where. The arrival of Poirot caused interest. His patent shoes, his immaculate moustaches, and his general air of foreign precision were in open conflict with the relaxed tyranny of the golfing set. I heard the word "Frenchman" whispered twice, which would have annoyed him extremely had he not been occupied in examining everybody's hands. Miss Caroline Ashby was found on the veranda overlooking the course, seated with an elderly woman in pearls and a young man whose weak chin was partly concealed by a pipe. She received us without surprise. "I wondered when you would come," she said. Poirot bowed. "Mademoiselle, you visited Mrs. Drayton the night before she died." "Yes." "You did not mention it. You did not ask. It is an answer much in favor today." She dismissed the young man and the elderly woman with a glance. They departed reluctantly. Poirot sat opposite her. "Why did you go?" "To warn her. Against her husband?" Caroline looked out across the course. A golfer had missed an easy putt and was staring at the hole as if it had betrayed him. "No," she said, "against me." The answer was so unexpected that I nearly dropped my hat. Poirot did not move. "Proceed." She took a cigarette from a silver case, then seemed to think better of it. "Eleanor and I were friends. Not intimate friends, perhaps, but old ones. Our families knew each other. I had known Roger before she did." "How well?" "Well enough to be foolish." Drayton's too handsome face rose in my mind. You were engaged? I asked. No, I was allowed to think we might be. And Mrs. Drayton knew? Not at first. Later, yes. Poirot said, You asked her for help. Caroline gave him a quick look. Who told you that? A little bird in an apron. For the first time, colour touched her cheeks. I had written letters, she said. To Roger, before his marriage. Stupid letters. Proud letters. A woman's letters. I believed he still had them. And you feared he would use them? I feared they would be found. Eleanor was already unhappy. If she discovered them in some ugly fashion, it would humiliate her. So you asked Mrs. Drayton to recover them? I asked her to make him return them. And she refused? She said she would not bargain with her own husband like a tradesman. Then she said something strange. What? Caroline's voice lowered. She said, Letters are not the only things Roger keeps. Poirot leaned forward. Did she explain? No. And the silk? He asked. Her hand, which had been resting on the arm of the chair, grew still. What silk? Poirot smiled sadly. Mademoiselle, you are too intelligent to ask that badly. For a moment, I thought she would deny everything. Instead, she looked straight at him. My scarf is missing, she said. Cream silk. I last wore it the night Eleanor died. And where did you lose it? I don't know. On the old bridle path? She stood up. No. You are certain? I said no, Monsieur Poirot. From the doorway behind us came a man's voice, lazy and amused. Caroline, my dear, you always did say no as if it were a confession. We turned. A tall, dark-haired man in riding clothes stood there, one shoulder against the frame, smiling as though murder were merely a tiresome interruption to the season. Caroline's face changed. Poirot noticed it. So did I. The man bowed slightly. Julian Mercer, he said, and unless I am mistaken, you are the celebrated detective who has come to teach Pinehurst how to be scandalized properly. Poirot rose. No, monsieur, he said. I have come to learn why, in this paradise of sport and good manners, everyone is so very much afraid. Chapter 4. The Carolina Room. Julian Mercer was one of those men who enter a room as if they had been privately invited by its architect. He was perhaps 38, lean, dark, and handsome in a careless way, with a face that had known both good clubs and bad decisions. His riding clothes were dusty but expensive. His boots were polished only where polish could survive honest use. He had the air of a man who could borrow money from another gentleman and make the lender feel socially rewarded. Caroline Ashby looked at him with dislike, or fear. In such matters I have often found the difference more delicate than one supposes. Julian, she said, this is not your affair. My dear Caroline, in Pinehurst, nothing is one's affair until luncheon. After that, it belongs to everybody. Poirot regarded him with interest. You knew Mrs. Drayton? Everyone knew Eleanor, or believed they did. And you? I was never so ambitious. You mean? Mercer smiled. I mean that rich women are very seldom known. They are estimated. Caroline turned away sharply. You always were vulgar. Only when accurate. Poirot, who was never irritated by impertinence when it promised information, motioned politely to a chair. Monsieur Mercer, perhaps you will sit down. Will I be questioned? Undoubtedly. Then I shall stand. It gives a man the illusion of freedom. He crossed to the veranda rail and looked out over the fairway. Beyond it, the pines shimmered in the afternoon heat, their trunks rising straight and reddish from the pale sand. A party of golfers advanced solemnly upon a green, as though attending a funeral. Poirot said, You are a friend of Mr. Drayton? Mercer gave a soft laugh. Roger has no friends. He has audiences. A rival, then? In what field? Horses? Cards? Women? Insolvency? Caroline said, "Julian." He glanced at her. "Very well. Roger and I have known one another for years. We have ridden in the same hunts, lost money at the same tables, and been disliked by the same fathers." "Mrs. Drayton's father was dead," I remarked. "Then he had excellent timing." Caroline rose. "I will not listen to this." But Poirot lifted one small hand. "Mademoiselle, if you please. One moment. Monsieur Mercer, where were you on the morning Mrs. Drayton died?" "At the stables." The answer was so immediate that it startled me. "At what time?" asked Poirot. "From 6:30 until a little after 7. I had a mare going stiff in the near foreleg. I wanted the trainer's opinion before breakfast." "Did you see Mr. Drayton?" "No." "Did you see Mrs. Drayton?" "No." "Did you see anyone?" Mercer hesitated for the first time. Poirot's eyes sharpened. "Yes." "I saw Caroline." Caroline's hand tightened on the back of her chair. "That is a lie." Mercer looked at her almost kindly. "It is many things, my dear, but not that." Poirot turned to her. "You were at the stables?" "No." "Then where were you?" "At home." "Can that be confirmed?" "My groom saddled my mare at 7:15. "That does not answer 6:30? "No." The little word fell between us like a pebble into a well. Mercer said lightly, "Perhaps I was mistaken." Poirot shook his head. "No, monsieur. You are many things. But you do not make that kind of mistake." Caroline's face had gone pale. For one moment I saw not the cool sportswoman, but a trapped, unhappy girl. "I did go out," she said, "early, but not to the stables." "To the bridle path?" asked Poirot. "No." "To meet Mrs. Drayton?" "No." "Then to meet whom?" She did not answer. Mercer's amusement had vanished. "Leave it, Poirot." "Ah," said Poirot softly. "Now it interests me more." At that moment Sheriff Braddock appeared on the veranda, breathing hard, his hat pushed back from his forehead. "I thought I'd find half the town here," he said. "Monsieur Poirot, Mrs. Staveley is asking for you. There's been a development." "What development?" The sheriff glanced at Caroline, then at Mercer. "Not here." We returned at once to the Staveley house. Mr. Alder awaited us in the drawing-room, holding a small cardboard box. Mrs. Staveley stood rigid by the window, her black dress severe against the white-painted frame. "What has happened?" asked Poirot. Mr. Alder set the box on the table. "This was delivered by hand at the kitchen door 20 minutes ago." "By whom?" "A boy. He was paid a quarter to bring it. He says a lady gave it to him near the post office." Inside the box lay a pair of gloves. They were pale grey kid, stained at the fingertips with something dark and rust-coloured. Mrs. Staveley spoke through clenched teeth. "They were Eleanor's." Poirot did not touch them. He bent, sniffed delicately, and examined the stitching. "Blood," said Sheriff Braddock. "Perhaps. What else would it be?" "There are many dark substances in the world, Sheriff. Some are more compromising than blood." Beside the gloves lay a folded visiting card. Poirot picked it up by the edge. On it, in a neat printed hand, were the words, "Ask the widower about the Carolina room." Drayton was sent for and arrived within 10 minutes, his irritation barely concealed. He looked first at Poirot, then at the box. "What fresh melodrama is this?" Poirot handed him the card. I watched his face carefully. For the smallest fraction of a second, he reacted. It was gone almost before it had appeared, but it had been there, surprise, anger, and beneath both, alarm. "Well?" said Mrs. Staveley. Drayton laid the card down. "I know nothing about it." Poirot said, "But you know the Carolina room?" "Everyone knows it. I do not." "It is a private dining room at the hotel, small, discreet, used for card parties, business dinners, assignations, and other sins of the respectable." "You were there the night before your wife died." Drayton looked at the sheriff. "Am I obliged to answer every insinuation made by an anonymous lunatic?" "No," said Braddock slowly, "but it might help if you did." Drayton's eyes hardened. "I was there for half an hour." "With whom?" "Julian Mercer." This interested Poirot. "At what time?" "After I left the motor, around 10:20. "And yet your chauffeur believed you were walking home." "I intended to. Mercer saw me outside the hotel and insisted on a drink." "What did you discuss?" "Cards." "Money?" "All cards discuss money eventually." "Did Mrs. Drayton know of this meeting?" "No." "You are certain?" "Yes." Mrs. Staveley turned from the window. "Roger, if you lie now, I shall spend every dollar I possess to see you ruined." He looked at her then, and for all his charm there was something ugly in his expression. "You have been trying to ruin me since the day Eleanor accepted me." "I was trying to save her." "You never saved her from loneliness." The words struck hard. Mrs. Staveley's face did not change, but I saw her hand close over the curtain cord until the knuckles whitened. Poirot stepped between them, not physically, but by the quiet authority of his voice. "The Carolina room," he said. "We go there." The room proved to be on the hotel's ground floor, tucked away behind a corridor panelled in dark wood. It contained a round table, 6 chairs, a sideboard, and a painting of some Confederate general looking annoyed to have been immortalized above the sherry. The curtains were heavy. The carpet patterned in red and brown would have concealed almost any stain Providence cared to send it. Poirot walked straight to the fireplace. "You had a fire that night?" he asked the hotel manager, a polished man named Mr. Renshaw. "In March, yes, sir. The evenings are still cool." "Who used the room?" Mr. Renshaw glanced at Drayton, then at Sheriff Braddock. "I could consult the register." Poirot smiled. "You have already consulted it." The manager sighed. "Mr. Mercer reserved it." "For how many?" "2. "Who served them?" "A waiter named Thomas Lee." Thomas Lee, when fetched, was a thin young man with intelligent eyes and a beautiful talent for anxiety. He confirmed that Mr. Mercer and Mr. Drayton had drunk whiskey in the room shortly after 10. They had argued. "About cards?" asked Poirot. "No, sir." "About money?" Thomas hesitated. A lady's name was mentioned. "Mrs. Drayton?" "No, sir." "Miss Ashby?" The waiter looked miserable. "Yes, sir." Drayton said, "This is nonsense." Thomas swallowed. "Mr. Mercer said Miss Ashby wouldn't be made a scapegoat. Mr. Drayton said she was old enough to look after herself. Then Mr. Mercer said, 'Eleanor knows enough to destroy you.'" The silence that followed was complete. Poirot turned slowly towards Drayton. "And did she, monsieur?" Drayton's voice was low. "My wife knew many things. Unfortunately, she understood very few." Poirot looked at the fireplace. Then he bent, and with the tongs, drew from behind the grate a blackened scrap that had escaped the flames. It was the corner of a photograph. Only a woman's gloved hand remained visible, resting upon the neck of a horse. On the wrist was a cream silk scarf. Poirot held it up. "No," he said. "Madame Drayton understood something. The question is, who discovered that she understood it?" Chapter 5. The photograph that burned badly. I have often noticed that a half-burned thing is more dangerous than one preserved entire. A complete photograph may tell too much, and so be explained away. A scrap tells only enough to invite terror. The charred corner in Poirot's hand had, at first glance, nothing criminal about it. A woman's gloved hand, a horse's neck, a cream silk scarf at the wrist, no more. Yet the effect upon the company was immediate. Roger Drayton went very still. The hotel manager, Mr. Renshaw, looked as though the reputation of the Pinehurst establishment had been personally assaulted by combustion. Sheriff Braddock said, "That could be anybody's hand." "Indeed," said Poirot, "hands like faces can deceive. But gloves, scarves, and horses, these are more faithful witnesses." Drayton gave a short, unpleasant laugh. "You'll solve the case by millinery next?" "By vanity, perhaps," said Poirot. "It leaves better traces." We were joined presently by Julian Mercer, who had been summoned from the stables and arrived smelling of leather, tobacco, and dust. He took the news of the photograph with less surprise than I expected, and more irritation. "You found that in the grate?" "Yes," said Poirot. "Then someone was damned careless." "Someone was hurried." Mercer glanced at Drayton. "Or theatrical." "You reserved this room," said the sheriff. "I did." "For yourself and Mr. Drayton?" "For myself, and whoever came when I sent word." "And why did you send word?" asked Poirot. Mercer leaned one hand on the back of a chair. "Because I had heard something that concerned Caroline Ashby." Drayton's expression darkened. "Leave her out of this." "That, Roger, is precisely what I was attempting to do." Poirot's eyes passed from one man to the other. "You quarrelled about Miss Ashby." "We disagreed." "Violently?" Mercer smiled without amusement. "In a private dining room among gentlemen, violence is usually postponed until after brandy." "And the photograph?" "I never saw it." Drayton said, "Nor did I." "That," said Poirot, "is unfortunate. It appears to have seen you." For once, neither man answered. From the hotel we went on to the stables. They lay beyond the clipped lawns and carriage drives, where Pinehurst's polish gave way to hay, sweat, saddle soap, and the honest arrogance of horses. I liked the place at once. Horses, unlike men, may kick you, but they seldom pretend it is for your own good. Caleb Pine, the groom who had first claimed to see Drayton early on the fatal morning, was found cleaning tack in a long shed. He was a wiry lad of 17 or 18, with sandy hair, wary eyes, and the look of one who had been told by too many important people to remember different things. Sheriff Braddock said, "Caleb, Monsieur Poirot has questions." The boy's face closed. "I already told you, Sheriff. I ain't sure who I saw." Poirot seated himself on an overturned bucket, to the evident horror of his trousers. "Mon ami," he said kindly, "we shall not begin with whom. We shall begin with the horse." Caleb blinked. "Horse?" "Yes. On that morning before 7, a horse was taken out?" The boy hesitated. "Maybe." "Ah. A horse is not a maybe. It is large, it eats, and it has opinions." "Which horse?" Caleb looked towards the stalls. "Miss Ashby's grey mare was saddled early." "By you?" "No, sir. By Mr. Mercer." Mercer, who had accompanied us, said sharply, "Careful, boy." The lad flushed, but continued. "He said Miss Ashby had sent word. I thought it queer, but he had the right to do it. He knows the horses." "And did Miss Ashby write her?" "Later, near 7:15. "Before that?" Caleb swallowed. "Someone led her out." "Who?" "I didn't see clear. Man or woman?" "I thought a man. But there was a coat. Long coat. Hat pulled down. Drayton said. "This is worthless." Poirot ignored him. "And Mr. Drayton? Did you see him?" "I thought I did. Near the feed room. But maybe I didn't." "Because Mr. Drayton spoke to you afterwards." The boy's eyes flicked towards Drayton and away. Poirot nodded. "Bon, we understand. Now the grey mare returned when?" Caleb looked miserable. "Before 8. Warm?" "Yes, sir." "Hard-ridden?" "No. Sweated some, but not hard." "Any mark on the saddle? The bridle? The reins?" "Sand on the left stirrup. Pine needles caught in the girth." "From the old bridle path?" "Could be." "And the horse's neck?" asked Poirot. "Any stain? Any mark where a gloved hand had rested?" Caleb stared at him. "I brushed something off," he said slowly. "Dark smear. I thought she'd rubbed against a rail." "Which side?" "Near side, left." The sheriff swore under his breath. Poirot stood, brushing at his knees. "And the cream silk scarf?" Caleb looked frightened now. "I never saw no scarf." "Think carefully." "I didn't." "Who came to the stables that morning besides Miss Ashby?" The boy counted on his fingers. "Mr. Mercer. Mr. Drayton, maybe. Miss Ashby. Mr. Leland." "Who is Mr. Leland?" I asked. Mercer answered. "A harmless parasite." Poirot turned to him. "Your definitions are always social, never factual. I prefer facts." We found Mr. Paul Leland in the smoking lounge of the hotel, composing a letter and making rather heavy weather of it. He was the young man with the weak chin, whom I had seen earlier with Caroline. At close quarters he looked pale, anxious, and expensively educated. His clothes had been chosen by someone with more taste than he possessed. At the sight of us he rose too quickly and knocked over an ashtray. "Really, Paul," murmured Mercer, who had followed us in, "if guilt were measured in clumsiness, you would hang by tea-time." Leland coloured. "Shut up, Julian." Poirot picked up the ashtray and set it neatly on the table. "Monsieur Leland, you were at the stables on the morning Mrs. Drayton died?" "Yes, I often ride before breakfast." "With Miss Ashby?" "No." "You are fond of Miss Ashby?" The unfortunate young man went crimson. "I admire her." "Does she admire you?" "I don't see what that has to do with Mrs. Drayton's death." "It may have nothing to do with it. That would be agreeable for you." Leland sat down again. "I saw Caroline that morning, if that is what you want. She was upset." "Where?" "Near the bridle path." This caused even Mercer to lose his expression of bored amusement. "What time?" asked Poirot. "A little after 7. "Was she alone?" "Yes." "On horseback?" "No, on foot." "Wearing a cream silk scarf?" He hesitated. "No." "You are sure?" "Yes. I remember because she looked cold. She had no scarf." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "And what did she say?" "She asked whether I had seen Eleanor." "Mrs. Drayton?" "Yes." "And had you?" "No." "Did she believe you?" "I don't know. She looked frightened." Poirot leaned forward. "Of what?" Leland's hands twisted together. She said, "If Roger has done what I think he has done, there will be no saving any of us." There was a silence. Then the door opened and Caroline Ashby herself stood there. Her eyes went first to Leland, then to Poirot, and lastly to Julian Mercer. "Paul," she said coldly, "you promised me you would keep your mouth shut." Leland rose. "Caroline, I—" "No. You were always too weak for silence." Poirot regarded her gravely. "Mademoiselle Ashby, silence is a door that opens only from one side. Eventually someone else finds the key. She came into the room, very pale but composed. Then ask me what you want to ask. Why were you near the bridle path that morning? To find Eleanor. Why? Because I had received a note. From Mrs. Drayton? I thought so. Have you that note? No, I burned it. Ah, said Poirot. So much burning in this case. What did it say? She lifted her chin. It said, "Come early, before the others are awake." I have found the proof, and I know now whom he means to ruin. Signed, E. And when you arrived, she was not there. What did you find? Caroline's control faltered. Her glove, she whispered, one grey glove lying in the sand. Did you take it? No, I was afraid. Of the glove? Of what it meant. Poirot was silent for a long moment. Then he said, Mademoiselle, who knew that you had loved Roger Drayton? She looked at him with a strange, tired bitterness. In Pinehurst, Monsieur Poirot, everyone. And who knew that you still feared him? This time she did not answer. Outside, beyond the hotel windows, the afternoon light lay golden upon the golf course and the pines. The place looked peaceful, civilized, almost innocent. But Poirot's face had grown grave. My friend, he said to me later, as we walked back beneath the long shadows, there are too many clues that point too neatly. The scarf, the gloves, the photograph, the note, each one says, look here, look here. And should we not? Oh, we shall look. But also, Hastings, we shall ask who is shouting so loudly. He paused beside the road, where the sand showed faint traces of wheels, hooves, and many passing feet. Tomorrow, he said, we shall speak to the dead woman's maid again, for it is not the lie of the husband that troubles me most. What is it, then? Poirot looked towards the Staveley house, pale and still among the pines. The courage of the victim. Chapter 6. The courage of Mrs. Drayton. The maid Della was not pleased to see us again. This was understandable. In my experience, servants dislike detectives even more than criminals do, for criminals may hope to deceive them, whereas servants know perfectly well that detectives will ask the same question 6 times and then attach importance to the 7th answer. Della stood in the Staveley kitchen with her sleeves rolled to the elbow, a dishcloth in her hands, and terror in her eyes. Poirot spoke gently. Mademoiselle Della, you told us that Miss Ashby came to see Mrs. Drayton on the night before the death. Yes, sir. And that Miss Ashby cried. Yes, sir. You heard Mrs. Drayton say, I cannot help you, Caroline, not now. The girl nodded, but there was more. She stared at him. Poirot continued, There is always more. The question is whether it matters enough to overcome fear. Della's lips trembled. I'll lose my place. My child, said Poirot. A woman has lost her life. That settled it. Della looked towards the door, lowered her voice and said, Mrs. Drayton told Miss Ashby she had written everything down. She said if anything happened, the papers would go to her mother. What papers? I don't know. She said Mr. Drayton had lied about more than money. Poirot's eyes did not move, but I knew he was listening with every nerve. Did she mention the Carolina room? Yes, sir. Sheriff Braddock, who had been standing heavily near the stove, gave a grunt. What did she say? Asked Poirot. She said, he thinks the Carolina room saved him, but it damned him. And Miss Ashby? She begged Mrs. Drayton not to use her name. Ah, said Poirot. Mrs. Staveley, who had insisted on being present, drew herself up. Then Roger killed my daughter to prevent exposure. Poirot turned to her. No, madame. The word fell with shocking calm. Mrs. Staveley stared. No? No. But the quarrels, the money, the lies? All true. Mr. Drayton lied. He married for money. He kept letters. He used women badly. He is vain, selfish, and probably dishonorable in several directions. I appreciate the defense, said Drayton from the doorway. We turned. He stood there, pale but composed, with Mr. Alder behind him and Julian Mercer at his shoulder. Caroline Ashby had also entered, white-faced and silent. Paul Leland hovered near the hall like a man wishing desperately to be somewhere else. Poirot looked around the kitchen. Bon, he said, since everyone comes when he should not, we shall have the truth here. Sheriff Braddock scowled. In the kitchen? Why not? Kitchens hear more truth than drawing rooms. Nobody moved. Poirot placed on the scrubbed wooden table 4 items: the strand of cream silk, the grey gloves, the burned photograph, and the anonymous card. These things, he said, have shouted at us from the beginning. They shouted, Roger Drayton is guilty. Roger quarrelled with his wife. Roger was seen at the stables. Roger met Julian Mercer in the Carolina room. Roger feared exposure. Roger had motive. Drayton's mouth tightened. But there was a difficulty, Poirot continued. The clues were too generous. The silk, the gloves delivered by hand, the card telling us where to look, the burned photograph left not quite burned. A murderer who wishes to hide himself does not usually build signposts. Julian Mercer said softly, unless he is a fool. Precisely, and Mr. Drayton is many things but not a fool. Mrs. Staveley gripped the back of a chair. Then who? Poirot did not answer her directly. On the morning of her death, Mrs. Drayton went out early. She had received a note, yes, but not the note sent to Miss Ashby. That was a copy, a lure. Mrs. Drayton went to the old bridle path because she believed she would meet someone who could give her proof. Proof of what? I asked. Of a conspiracy of shame. Mr. Drayton had courted Miss Ashby before his marriage. He had kept her letters. He had hinted that if she exposed him, her reputation would suffer. Mrs. Drayton discovered this. But she discovered also something else. That someone was using the scandal for his own purpose. His eyes moved to Julian Mercer. Mercer's smile disappeared. Poirot said, You loved Miss Ashby. Caroline gave a faint cry. Mercer did not look at her. You had known of Drayton's behavior for some time. You despised him, but you did not act from chivalry alone. You were in debt. He knew it. You feared that if he gained control of Mrs. Drayton's money, he might ruin you as well as Miss Ashby. So you arranged the meeting in the Carolina room. You threatened him. He threatened you. The waiter heard enough. Mercer said, This is guesswork. No, it is psychology supported by a horse. Caleb Pine had been brought in quietly by the sheriff and stood now near the back door, cap in hand. Poirot turned to him. You saddled the grey mare? The boy shook his head. Mr. Mercer did. Because he knew she would not be missed if Miss Ashby rode later. He led the mare out before 7, wearing a long coat and hat. Mrs. Drayton met him by the bridle path. She thought he came as an ally. Mercer's face had gone grey. Caroline whispered, Julian? Poirot's voice sharpened. She had courage, that lady. She did not go blindly. She went because she meant to end the cruelty around her, to free herself, to free Miss Ashby, perhaps even to confront her husband publicly. But she had misjudged one thing. She thought Monsieur Mercer's hatred of Drayton made him safe. Mercer laughed once. You cannot prove a word. Poirot picked up the burned photograph. You took a photograph earlier in the season. Miss Ashby's hand on the mare, her cream scarf at the wrist. It proved the mare and the scarf were associated with her. After the murder, You used those things to draw suspicion towards her and then towards Drayton. But you burned the photograph because it also showed another thing." "What?" Poirot turned the charred scrap over. "The paper is not ordinary photographic paper. It came from a private camera owned by Mr. Leland." Paul Leland started. "Mine?" "Yes. You lent it often, did you not?" Yes. "To Mr. Mercer." Leland stared at him. "Julian?" Poirot said, "The full photograph would have shown not merely the mare and the scarf, but the man holding the reins in the background. A man wearing a distinctive signet ring." Mercer's right hand moved. Too late. Poirot had seen it. So had Sheriff Braddock. "The same ring," said Poirot, "that caught and tore the silk when Mrs. Drayton struggled." The sheriff stepped forward. Mercer backed away. "This is absurd." Poirot's voice was cold now. "You strangled her first with the scarf, but she fought. You struck her. You placed her in the sand to suggest a fall, then returned the mare. Later, when suspicion did not settle quickly enough, you sent the gloves, the card, and guided us to the Carolina room. You wished Mr. Drayton destroyed. You were prepared also to sacrifice Miss Ashby if necessary." "No," said Caroline. "It was not denial. It was pain." Mercer looked at her then, and something broke in him. "He would have ruined you," he said. "He would have dragged you down with him." "And Eleanor?" she whispered. "She was going to expose everything. She would have exposed you too. She was trying to save me." Mercer's mouth opened, but no answer came. Mrs. Staveley made a sound I shall not forget. It was not a sob. It was the sound of pride and grief meeting at last, and finding grief the stronger. Sheriff Braddock took Mercer by the arm. This time the man did not smile. Later, Poirot and I walked once more beneath the long-leaf pines. The evening light lay copper across the sand. Somewhere beyond the trees a horse whinnied, and from the direction of the course came the faint, foolish triumph of a man who had at last managed a decent putt. "Poor Mrs. Drayton," I said. "She was right to be afraid." "Yes," said Poirot, "but not of the person she thought." "And Drayton?" Poirot's expression hardened. "He is punished already, though perhaps not by law. He will go on living with himself. For some men, Hastings, that is a sentence." We passed the old bridle path, quiet now beneath the pines. "You said she had courage," I said. "She had, mon ami. She was not merely the rich bride, the unhappy wife, the victim of gossip. She saw clearly at the end. She tried to act. That is why she died." The wind moved softly through the pines, whispering over the sand as if the place itself wished to keep its secrets. But this one, at least, had been taken from it. Epilogue. The Real Pinehurst Mystery. This story was inspired by the real and still debated death of Elva Statler Davidson, a young American heiress whose life ended in Pinehurst, North Carolina, in 1935. Elva was the adopted daughter of hotel magnate Ellsworth Statler, whose fortune made her a woman of considerable wealth. She had recently married Henry Bradley Davidson, Jr., an older man whose background and motives became the subject of intense suspicion after her death. In February 1935, Elva was found dead in circumstances that shocked the quiet resort community of Pinehurst, then already known as a polished refuge for wealthy visitors, golfers, horse people, and society families. Contemporary accounts described her body as being discovered in or near her Packard Roadster, and the case quickly became national news. The ingredients were irresistible to the newspapers. A young bride, a large inheritance, a husband viewed by some as socially questionable, and a death whose cause was never established to everyone's satisfaction. Many suspected Henry Davidson, partly because of the financial benefit he stood to receive. Yet the coroner's inquest did not result in a murder charge, and Davidson was never indicted. He later succeeded in court in defending his right to inherit under Elva's will. The case was later revisited by journalist Steve Bowser in his book Death of a Pinehurst Princess, the 1935 Elva Statler Davidson mystery. Bowser reconstructed the events, the inquest, the legal aftermath, and the atmosphere of Pinehurst society. According to published summaries of the book, he leaned toward suicide as a possible explanation, but the matter remains unresolved enough to retain its fascination. Our fictional version changes names, circumstances, motives, and outcome. The real Elva Statler Davidson did not receive the neat justice of a detective story. There was no Belgian detective to gather the suspects, separate pride from fact, and give the dead a final voice. What remains is a haunting American mystery. A wealthy young woman, a troubled marriage, a resort town anxious to protect its image, and a question that has outlived nearly everyone who first asked it. What truly happened to Elva Statler Davidson in Pinehurst in 1935? History, unlike fiction, has never answered. Thank you for listening all the way to the end of The Sandhills Bride. This was a case in which the clues shouted too loudly and pointed too neatly. The cream silk scarf, the grey gloves, the burned photograph, the anonymous card, each one said, look here, and each one led toward Roger Drayton, the handsome husband who rode too well and married for money. But our detective saw through the noise because a murderer who wishes to hide himself does not usually build signposts. Julian Mercer had loved Caroline Ashby, feared Drayton's power over her, and when Eleanor Drayton set out that morning with courage and proof and the intention of ending the cruelty around her, Mercer strangled her with the scarf, not because she threatened him, but because she was about to expose everything. And in saving Caroline from Drayton, she would have exposed Caroline too. It was not chivalry. It was possession wearing chivalry's coat. And when Caroline whispered she was trying to save me, and Mercer had no answer, the case closed itself. What lingers is the historical shadow beneath the fiction. This story was inspired by the real and still debated death of Elva Statler Davidson, a young American heiress found dead in Pinehurst, North Carolina in February 1935. Elva was the adopted daughter of hotel magnate Ellsworth Statler, whose fortune made her a woman of considerable wealth. She had recently married Henry Bradley Davidson, Jr., an older man whose background and motives became the subject of intense suspicion. The case became national news: a young bride, a large inheritance, a husband viewed as socially questionable, and a death whose cause was never established to everyone's satisfaction. Davidson was never indicted, and the coroner's inquest settled upon nothing definitive. Journalist Steve Bowser later revisited the case in his book Death of a Pinehurst Princess, but the matter remains unresolved. The real Elva Statler Davidson did not receive the neat justice of a detective story. History, unlike fiction, has never answered. If this kind of mystery stayed with you, the ones set in polished resort towns where money attempts not to look vulgar, the golf course gleams in the morning sun, and the most dangerous man is not the husband everyone suspects, but the one who hides behind someone else's guilt. Tell us in the comments when you stop trusting Mercer and what you make of the real case behind the fiction. Tell us, too, where you'd like us to go next. More American mysteries, more resort towns with secrets dressed for luncheon, more cases where the dead woman was braver than anyone around her. And if you'd like to support Nocturnal Tales and help keep these full-length mysteries coming, you'll find links in the description for Patreon and for one-off tips via Buy Me a Coffee or PayPal. Our ebook, Nocturnal Tales, The Collected Mysteries, Volume 2, is also available for $3.99 on Patreon, Gumroad, and Buy Me a Coffee. For now, thank you again for staying with us to the last line. Until the next case, be wary of men who build signposts toward other men's guilt. Never trust grief that arrives too well arranged. And remember, she did not go blindly. And that, in the end, is both the tragedy and the honor of Eleanor Drayton.